The laughter of table one is infectious. It's a very serious business. I don't know what you're laughing about. Okay, do we have some questions for our panelists that are here? And we very much do. And I'm keeping all this in mind, and I will come back. Table 10 have not got to ask a question yet, and so I'm going to come to them first, and then I'll come back over here.
Hi, so my name is Aves, and I guess my question, or rather our question was, do you think that the privatization of semi-state-owned or fully state-owned organizations is something that can be a hindrance to trying to reverse biodiversity loss, as private interests, business interests might take precedence over the greater good, which I guess state-owned companies would be more likely to care about?
Great question. Thanks, Aves.
Do you have a state agency in mind, or did you?
Not really. I mean, let's say Edgelink was state-owned, and when it's state-owned, I guess they could.
We might just get the microphone back to you. Yeah.
Yeah, so when they're state-owned, I guess they could be more conscious of, the government's own agenda in regards to biodiversity loss, maybe try to reduce its emissions or pay, carbon tax to offset its emissions. But as it became privatized, business interests, shareholders, profits takes precedence over the government's agenda in that case.
It's an interesting question. I'm trying to think of examples. We do have semi-state bodies, such as QnA is the biggest landowner in the state. It owns about 7% of Ireland. Bord na Móna, which owns a lot of our bogland. The Office of Public Works, for instance, is also a state agency. I'm not sure being close to government has allow them to prioritise the protection of biodiversity. In some instances, not in all of those examples, but Coillte, for instance, is set up in order to make money on a for-profit basis. And so addressing the climate of biodiversity is not among their priorities. They might say it is, but it isn't really. And so the big issue we have is with those kind of state agencies that either own land or they're responsible for certain activities on land, but that protecting biodiversity is not their remit. And a lot of it is to do with just outdated legislation. Like the Office of Public Works operates under the Arterial Drainage Act from 1945, under which it dredges and drains about 12,000 kilometres of rivers, and they would say to us, look, we have to operate under the legislation that's there. So that is a problem in many cases.
Thank you. Contrasting exactly what you were asking, I think, of us. And Karen, you want to respond to that too?
Yeah, maybe just to add to it, harbour authorities are usually in estuaries, in very sensitive areas. And I remember talking about 2 years ago to a harbour authority and saying, look, instead of pushing capital dredging scheme to get even bigger and deeper, because every other harbour is trying to do the same thing, and you don't need all of this, why not go for ecotourism and for environmental protection and archaeology? This is Waterford Harbour, which is really a very beautiful estuary. And he said, Karen, my terms of reference are to make money. And if you change the terms of reference, then on a personal scale, yes, I can see that makes sense. So where we have to focus on is the terms of reference.
Thank you, Karen. Now, there was a shot of hands up here, so I'm going to take your question on table 2. Table 2 first, sorry.
Hi, we were very impressed with the presentations from the NGOs and from the local environment groups. And we were just wondering, and I'm not too clear on the brief of the Irish Environmental Network that you referred to, but we were wondering if there were a permanent funded forum for NGOs and possibly local environmental groups would actually be of use, maybe better use than the Citizens' Assembly, but certainly be of use. And if so, what sort of shape it might take?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a difficult question to answer, because if it's like environmental NGOs, we've been at this for years. Like, you know, we were talking about, we've been going since the 40s, IWT has been going from the 70s. We talk and talk and talk until we're blue in the face, and we still aren't getting where we need to go. So while it'd be great to get us all in the same room talking to each other, our message doesn't seem to be getting out there, which is why a process like this is so important. So the government can hear from other voices, and they would look to us and likely think, oh, they're you know, those tree huggers again, or, you know, the people who don't understand how the economy works, they just care about, you know, the coast or whatever. So I think we need some sort of a hybrid where I can't think of a good example. Essentially, we need more money to go into the ENGO sector, but we need to find a better mechanism so what we're saying is being heard. I don't know what the solution is to that. I don't know, Karen and Porrick, if you've any
I'll just
suggestions.
add to that. The IEN, the Environment Network, has about 34 organisations in it, and we all have a national remit, so it's just for national organisations. And that is designed just to bring us together so that we're not duplicating work, and it works very well, I think. Then there's another structure called the Environmental Pillar, which was formed under Bertie Ahern's social partnership. So under that, we get access to meetings with ministers, meetings with state agencies and all the rest of it. But as Elaine said, you know, it's a box-ticking exercise for a lot of them. You know, oh, we've met the environmental groups, we're just going to carry on doing what we do anyway. So that message that we're trying to deliver is not getting up to the levels where it needs to be.
May I just add one other thing? So to be fair to government, government is funding the environment pillar and NGOs, and they are permanent staff there to coordinate us and to have those meetings with ministers. And some ministers do react. But others don't even want to see you. So, and there's no obligation to see you. But something else, which is a hybrid, which could be wider than us NGOs, is like an Aarhus Center, like ENFO used to be, where people can go to get information, and where you have a knowledgeable core, like a green telephone, where you can phone you say, look, this is happening, help me. And we don't have that at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. I'm going to take this question from table 3. And I'm not purposely ignoring people, but those who have already asked a question today, I'm just going to try and make sure that there's opportunity for as many diverse voices as possible. So.
Thanks. Hello, I'm Anne. We were also very interested in the funding, and we were amazed, all of us at this table, with both your work and the local community groups. But we also were querying the national biodiversity plans, and we gather that we are preparing the 4th one at the moment. Have you any input? Is there any results from these plans previously? Any proof of implementation? Any results? Or do you see them? Thank you.
So the answer is yes. So I represent the environmental pillar on the Biodiversity Forum, which is an independent group to monitor the implementation of the Biodiversity Action Plan. But as you point out, we've had 3 of these action plans so far, and we're going to produce another one. And none of them have really been implemented, let's be honest. They're produced by, you know, a minister, and then there's no obligation for other ministers to read them. There's no obligation for departments to actually do the things that are said in it. They monitor their own implementation. The forum itself is quite weak. There's no you know, we're not really set up to hold the government to account in a way that, for instance, the Climate Advisory Council is set up in order to hold the government to account for the implementation of the Climate Act. So basically, those mechanisms aren't there to hold the government to account for doing the things that it wants to do. I mean, yes, we have input, but it doesn't go very far.
Can I just quickly add something to that? And just to say, if you haven't already noticed, in Ireland we're great at committing to things and promising to do things, but we're really bad at actually delivering it. So one suggestion would be to move the Biodiversity Action Plan onto a statutory footing, a bit like the Climate Act. So it's actually given power. So you can, you know, you can wield a big stick and say, have you done your bit? So that would be one of the suggestions that the NGOs would have for how that could be tackled.
And just to add to that, this fourth biodiversity plan will wait for our recommendations to come through. And so hopefully the recommendations from this Citizens' Assembly will also feed into that biodiversity plan. But then you might ask, well, then what happens to it after that too? So all things to consider for down the line. Okay, we have time for one or two more questions if there's any more hands that are... Anyone on table 13? Because table 13 haven't asked a question today yet. I'm going to put you on the spot.
While they're thinking, can I just add one other thing to, you know, the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan, which came out earlier this year. And you know the rewilding by Keelings, where they were giving out the wildflower seed, which came from I don't know where. So you have two totally contradictory things. All-Ireland Pollinator Plan says, don't buy those seed packets. Give your local native flora a chance. At the same time, you are getting free packets of seeds. And I was praying that there would be somebody in government who would say something. But the pollinator plan is only advisory. And it is, so the pollinator plan says, just don't mow, encourage your native plants with the dormant seeds to come up. But at the same time, it was marketing. Industry were marketing a rewilding of Ireland with seeds, which in the majority of cases has come from abroad.
Okay, thanks, Karen. We can't check that fact right now, so we might have to come back to it, but we will be talking about industry at some point as well. So we have a brave person from table 13. Thank
Hello.
you.
So Rebecca from lucky number table 13. Thank you so much for all the information and speakers. We've really taken on everything. And everyone's answered or asked great questions, so we're like, shit. But I think we've kind of really understood that there's like a lack of clarity, there's a lack of kind of talking from the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top. And maybe, do you guys have another country that you'd look to that does what we need to do really well? Or is there somewhere where we can look for really good advice on the struggles we're having with clarity and communication and funding? Like, does anybody do it really well? And we can copy that. No, and yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great question, Rebecca. Thank you. To the panel?
Maybe Coast Watch is in 23 European countries, and we asked exactly that question. And the answer is no country is perfect, but each or most countries have something they're doing particularly well. So Luxembourg, for example, I would point out would be particularly good at education and knowledge and wanting the citizens to understand what is precious and making it politically possible for the minister to do the right thing by having so every child, for example, by law, the education minister used to be part of our group. When he became minister, from being an NGO, he said, the first thing I'll do in the first 3 months, I will make every child it mandatory that they go to an environmental education center and out into the countryside at least 2 days a year, because they have to understand nature and see it. And it's made a huge difference.
My favourite countries, I have to look outside Europe. As Karen said, there's no country that's really doing it perfectly, but some countries are doing it really well. Nepal managed to double its tiger population in the last 10 years, and Nepal is one of the poorest countries on earth. Costa Rica had a terrible problem with deforestation in the 1980s, recognized the problem, paid farmers for what we are calling now ecosystem services, basically to regenerate, to allow the forest to regenerate, and they're enormously proud of their country in terms of the nature and biodiversity they have. Some of the countries in Latin America have rights of nature in their constitution. In Ireland, we have been drowned in a kind of a greenwashing message that, you know, Ireland is sure windswept and the Atlantic Ocean is lapping at our shores and everything is wonderful. And this is the message that we hear. But I think we have to be obviously honest with ourselves in the first instance. But there are certainly countries that are doing it a lot better than we are.
And if I can come in with that, Rebecca, just because I'm reading Roman's book at the moment, and there's certain countries that seem to revere nature far better than we are doing. Parts of Canada, New Zealand, Chile, I think in its new constitution, which is putting together through Citizens' Assembly, is now incorporating rights of nature, things like that. So we might actually come back to that because it's a great question. So thank you, everybody. I feel like there's been a wealth of discussion, a wealth of content, a wealth of questions today. I'm sure you're all exhausted and a little bit overwhelmed, but that's okay because we'll solve all the problems now this evening when you're relaxing over dinner. Don't worry, you don't have to talk about biodiversity anymore. Thank you to the 25 people who asked a question today, and a special thanks to Fiona on table 3 who started us off with all the questions. So a round of applause for Fiona. I just want to thank our signers as well, Darren, Michael, for being here for the whole day long, working away, and just it's great to have that because it's ensuring that there's people at home who can tune into the work that we're doing. And according to social media, there are a lot of people tuning into what we are doing today, which is great. Thank you also to the facilitators and note takers led by Aoife. Your work is really important because I believe Art and I now get to review notes that have been taken from today. And don't worry, nothing from the conversations will be lost. They will be reviewed, summarised. We're going to come back to it first thing in the morning, answer questions that haven't been answered. The EAG will be here, so we will be mopping up anything from today that you feel didn't get answered. And do tell us what is missing now that we can incorporate weekends 2, 3. Hopefully we have thought about it already, but we may not have. So looking forward to having your feedback. Our arrangements for this evening, for those who don't want to escape to watch, there's a soccer match happening apparently, Robert told me. So maybe you'll get time to do both, but there's a reception in the Griffin Lounge at 6:30 p.m. and that's followed by dinner in the O'Carlin Suite at 7:15. So 6:30, you have time to go stretch your legs, get some sea air if you wish, or just relax in your room and not have to talk to anybody for an hour. Imagine, wouldn't that be lovely? Okay, thank you everybody. I think it's been a great first day and thank you so much for that.